890 meters away, a Taliban sniper smirked behind his scope, convinced he was untouchable. He had an entire U.S. Navy SEAL platoon pinned down behind crumbling mud walls in the hellish heat of Kandahar. His next round would be his masterpiece, the kill that would make him a legend among his brothers. He never heard the shot that ended his life. He didn't feel the 338 Lapua Magnum round, traveling at over 3,000 feet per second, punch through his skull. He simply ceased to be, but the SEALs heard it. Not the crack of the rifle, but the chilling, calm voice that crackled over their encrypted comms, cutting through the chaos like a knife. Target down. Ghost 206 out. For 6 months they hunted for the phantom who saved them. They scoured intelligence reports, analyzed ballistics, and whispered theories in the dim light of forward operating bases. Was it a CIA paramilitary officer? A rogue Russian contractor? A myth? When they finally uncovered the truth, the revelation was met with stunned disbelief. The ghost who had just saved America's most elite warriors wasn't a grizzled veteran from Langley or a foreign mercenary. It was a 28-year-old U.S. Army Staff Sergeant, and her name was Raven Blackwood. This is not just a story of one impossible shot. This is the epic saga of the River Wraith, a warrior forged in the ancient ways of her Native American ancestors and tempered in the fires of modern warfare. It is a tale of unparalleled skill, of operating alone in the places where angels fear to tread, and of a woman who didn't just bend the rules of combat, she rewrote them, using water itself as her weapon and her shield. From the frigid irrigation canals of Afghanistan to the sun-drenched sniper school at Fort Liberty, prepare to dive into the classified world of America's most unconventional shadow warrior. The name Raven Blackwood carries a weight in the hushed corridors of the Joint Special Operations Command JSOC that few outside its walls can comprehend. To the uninitiated, she is Staff Sergeant Blackwood, a decorated soldier with ribbons on her dress uniform that most service members will never earn in a lifetime. 3 bronze stars with V devices for valor, a silver star, and a Distinguished Service Cross recommendation working its way through the labyrinthine approval process. Her features, sharp and defined by years spent squinting into desert suns and mountain winds, speak of her Blackfeet heritage, a lineage of warriors that stretches back centuries. But to the men of Delta Force, SEAL Team 6 and the Green Berets who operate in the world's darkest corners, she is something else entirely. She is Ghost 206, her operational call sign, a spectral presence that materializes only when all other options have failed. She is the River Wraith, a nickname born from her uncanny ability to vanish into water, to become one with the current, and to strike from the most unexpected, impossible places. She is the solution to problems that have no solution. Her journey to becoming this living legend didn't begin in the high-tech simulators of Fort Bragg or the arid training grounds of the Mojave. It began in the vast windswept plains of the Blackfeet Reservation in Montana, under the stern but loving tutelage of her grandfather, a Vietnam-era Marine Force recon sniper named Joseph Blackwood. After Raven's parents were tragically killed in a car accident when she was just 8 years old, her grandfather became her world, her anchor, and her first instructor in the ancient art of the hunt. He didn't teach her to shoot with laser sights and ballistic computers. He taught her the old ways, the ways of the land and the sky. He taught her to read the wind not by anemometer, but by watching the subtle dance of prairie grass. He taught her to control her breath until her heartbeat became a distant echo, until she was no longer a girl hiding in the brush, but part of the earth itself. A good shot, he would rasp, his voice like gravel, is not about the gun. It is about becoming stillness. It is about patience that outlasts the mountain. But his most profound lessons were about water. Their Blackfeet ancestors, he explained, didn't see rivers as obstacles. They saw them as highways, as shields, as living, breathing entities that could carry you to safety or deliver you to your enemy unseen. He told her stories of warriors who swam miles underwater to flank enemy camps, who used the murk of flooded rivers to conceal their approach. By the age of 14, Raven could hold her breath for 4 minutes, a feat that would make Olympic swimmers envious. She could track a man through a dense forest without snapping a single twig, her movements as silent as falling snow, and she could place a bullet into the heart of a running deer at 400 meters with a battered second-hand hunting rifle, her aim guided by an instinct that felt less like skill and more like a sixth sense. Her decision to enlist at 18 was never in question. The only debate was which branch. She chose the Army over the Marines for one simple, pragmatic reason. They guaranteed her a slot at the U.S. Army Sniper School at Fort Benning after basic training. The instructors at Benning, hardened veterans who had seen every kind of shooter imaginable, were flabbergasted. Raven didn't just shoot accurately. She shot instinctively. It was as if she could see the bullet's path before she pulled the trigger. As if the laws of physics bent to her will, she aced every test, shattered every record, and graduated at the top of her class, her instructors whispering that they had just trained a once-in-a-generation talent. Her first deployment to Iraq was a baptism by fire, but it was her second tour, attached to the legendary 3rd Ranger Battalion in Afghanistan, that truly forged her into Ghost 206. Tasked with eliminating a high-value Taliban commander, Raven spent 9 grueling hours partially submerged in a fetid, open-air sewage ditch under the scorching Afghan sun. The stench was unimaginable, the insects relentless, and the risk of disease or discovery constant. Yet she remained motionless, her scope trained on the target's compound. When the moment came, she took the shot, eliminating the target with a single, perfect round. The Ranger captain who witnessed her preternatural, calm and endurance immediately recommended her for the JSOC assessment and selection course, the gateway to the military's most secretive and elite units. At just 22, she became the youngest soldier ever selected for JSOC's specialized sniper program. But her legend wasn't built in classrooms or on firing ranges. It was built in the blood and mud of real-world operations, in the never-happened missions that don't appear on official records. It was built in Syria during Operation Iron Thunder. The Euphrates River, snaking through the war-torn landscape of northern Syria, was more than just a geographical feature. For ISIS, it was a defensive moat. For the trapped Delta Force Squadron, it was a death trap. And for Staff Sergeant Raven Blackwood, it was the perfect overwatch position. The mission was a disaster from the start. A 12-man Delta Force team, tasked with gathering intelligence on an ISIS stronghold, had been ambushed. Pinned down in a ruined village on the riverbank, they were taking heavy fire from 7 entrenched ISIS fighters, positioned in a fortified building across the water. Aerial support was unavailable, and a ground assault would mean walking into a kill zone. The clock was ticking. The Deltas were running low on ammo and casualties were mounting. Raven, operating solo as part of a JSOC Ghost team, was the only asset in the area. Her orders were simple: provide overwatch and eliminate the threat. What she did next would become the stuff of special operations folklore. She didn't seek high ground. She sought the river, stripping down to a thin wetsuit and donning a closed-circuit rebreather to eliminate any telltale bubbles. She slipped into the cold, muddy waters of the Euphrates. For 14 hours she remained submerged, her body anchored against the current, her head barely breaking the surface. She used reeds and floating debris for cover. Her specially modified Remington MSR sniper rifle, chambered in the powerful .338 Lapua Magnum, sealed in a waterproof casing until the moment of engagement. She became the river. The current flowed around her. Fish darted past her legs. The enemy, scanning the banks and rooftops, never thought to look in the water. As dusk fell, the ISIS fighters, emboldened and believing the Americans were finished, became careless. One by one they exposed themselves, moving between firing positions or stepping out to reload. Raven's world narrowed to the crosshairs of her scope. Her breathing slowed to an almost imperceptible rhythm, her body temperature dropping, her mind achieving a state of hyper-focused calm. Bolt. Breathe. Squeeze. Cycle. The first shot cracked the evening air, dropping an ISIS fighter who had just stepped onto a balcony. Before his body hit the ground, Raven had already cycled the bolt. The second shot caught another fighter peering through a window. The third, fourth, and fifth followed in rapid mechanical succession. Each shot was a masterpiece of long-range ballistics, factoring in wind drift, bullet drop, and the Coriolis effect. Her longest shot that day, the one that would cement her reputation, came at 1,240 meters. The target was a sniper positioned on a distant rooftop, his own rifle trained on the pinned-down deltas. Using hand-loaded match-grade ammunition, she had prepared herself. Raven calculated the shot. The wind was tricky, swirling off the river. The bullet would be in flight for nearly 2 seconds. It was, by all conventional wisdom, an impossible shot. The .338 Lapua Magnum round left the barrel with a muted crack, arcing high into the twilight sky before descending like a vengeful angel. It struck the ISIS sniper square in the chest, lifting him off his feet and throwing him backward off the roof. 6 more shots followed, each one finding its mark. In less than 3 minutes, Raven had neutralized all 7 ISIS fighters, turning the tide of the battle and saving the entire Delta Force squadron. When she finally emerged from the river, shivering and coated in mud, the Delta stared at her in awe. They had heard the shots, seen their enemies fall, but they had never seen her. She was a ghost, a wraith who had risen from the river to deliver death. From that day forward, Ghost 206 was no longer just a call sign. It was a promise that when all hope seemed lost, when the mission was impossible, the River Wraith would be there. The summons came on a crisp autumn morning at Fort Liberty, North Carolina. Raven was pulled from her duties as an instructor at the Army Sniper School, where she was teaching the next generation of snipers the fine art of patience and precision. She was ordered to report to the JSOC conference room, a place where only the most critical and classified missions were discussed. Inside, the air was thick with tension and testosterone. 15 of the most formidable men in the U.S. military were assembled. Delta Force squadron commanders, SEAL team leaders, Green Beret captains. These were the men who planned and executed the nation's most dangerous missions, and they were stumped. General Morrison, a grizzled veteran with a face like worn leather, opened the briefing. "Staff Sergeant Blackwood, we have a situation. A rogue Afghan Special Forces commander, Hassan Rahimi, has taken 32 American civilian contractors hostage in Helmand province. He was trained by us at Fort Bragg 8 years ago. He knows our tactics, our playbooks, our weaknesses. He's already killed 2 SEAL teams we sent in. We're out of conventional options." The satellite imagery was grim. The compound was a fortress, surrounded by a network of irrigation canals with flat, open fields of opium poppies offering zero natural cover for miles. Guard towers with overlapping fields of fire made a ground assault suicidal. An air assault would be met with a hail of RPGs and heavy machine gun fire. Time was running out. The Secretary of Defense's niece was among the hostages, and the White House had given them 72 hours to resolve the crisis. The room was silent as Raven studied the imagery. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned every detail: the depth of the canals, the patterns of the guards, the layout of the buildings. Then she asked a question that broke the silence like a hammer on glass. "What's the water temperature in those canals?" The room erupted. A Delta Force major let out a derisive laugh. 62 degrees Fahrenheit, Sergeant. In October. You'd be dead from hypothermia in an hour. Raven didn't flinch. "With proper thermal protection and conditioning, I can operate for 4 to 5 hours. Give me a 2-man support element, my MSR and 338 Lapua, and 12 hours to prepare. No helicopters, no breach, no firefight." The SEAL captain shook his head. "The canals are inconsistent. Some sections are 4 feet deep. You'll be exposed." "Not if I move at night and position before dawn," Raven countered, her voice calm and steady. "Not if I use the debris fields for concealment." "I've done this before." General Morrison leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "The hostages include the Secretary of Defense's niece. If you fail—" "I don't fail, sir," Raven interrupted, her voice like steel. "I adapt to the environment until the mission succeeds." The Delta major scoffed again. "No woman has ever—" Raven's eyes turned glacial, cutting him off. "Gender doesn't pull triggers, Major. Training and patience do. Would you prefer to send another team to die?" The challenge hung in the air. The men in the room, accustomed to being the best of the best, were being asked to trust their lives and the lives of 32 hostages to a plan that defied every rule in their playbook. To trust a woman who wanted to swim through freezing water to take impossible shots. Outside on the balcony, Raven stood alone, watching the sun set. She thought of her grandfather's final words. "The river doesn't fight the rocks, child. It goes around, under, through. Be the river." For 10 years she had been the river, flowing through the world's most dangerous places, carrying death in her current, unseen but always felt. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister on the reservation. "Saw the news about the hostages. I know you can't tell me, but be careful. Your nephew asks when Aunt Raven is visiting." Her nephew, just 8 years old. The same age she was when her grandfather first put a rifle in her hands. She had promised to take him hunting that winter, to pass on the legacy. But first, 32 Americans needed to come home. Master Sergeant Williams, a respected Delta operator, stepped out to join her. "I've read your file, Sergeant. That shot in Syria, 40 meters, should have been impossible." "Everything's impossible," Raven replied, "until someone does it." He handed her a sealed folder. "Your support team. We launch in 6 hours. The SEALs have a $50,000 pool betting you won't make the shot." A ghost of a smile touched Raven's lips. "Tell them I don't bet on other people's pride. I bet on my training. Helmand Province, Afghanistan. 200 hours. The night was moonless, the air bitingly cold. Raven Blackwood stood at the edge of an irrigation canal 2 miles from the target compound, clad in a 5mm neoprene wetsuit layered over a thermal undergarment. Her closed-circuit rebreather was secured, its hoses coiled neatly. Her Remington MSR, broken down and sealed in a waterproof case, was strapped to her back. She looked less like a soldier and more like a creature of the deep, preparing to return to its natural habitat. Master Sergeant Williams and Sergeant First Class Torres, her 2-man support team, set up an observation post on a distant ridge, 600 meters away. Through their high-powered thermal scopes, they watched Raven's heat signature as she slipped silently into the black water. "Ghost 206, entering the river," she whispered into her bone conduction microphone, her voice barely audible even to her own ears. The cold was a physical blow, 1,000 icy needles piercing her skin. The current, fed by snowmelt from the distant mountains, was stronger than anticipated, tugging at her body. The canal's depth varied wildly, from 4 feet in some stretches to nearly 6 in others. She stayed in the deepest channels, letting the current carry her, conserving energy. Her rebreather emitted no bubbles, leaving no trail for watchful eyes. 90 minutes into the swim, her core body temperature had dropped to 95 degrees. Hypothermia was setting in, a creeping numbness that threatened to dull her senses and slow her reactions. In her mind, she heard her grandfather's voice. "The cold is just another environment, child. Respect it. Use it." She focused on her breathing, on the rhythmic pull of her muscles, on the mission. The cold was not her enemy. It was her ally, masking her heat signature from enemy thermal sites. After 3 hours of silent, grueling progress, she reached her designated firing position, 450 meters from the compound's main building. A recent storm had deposited a tangle of branches, mud, and debris in this section of the canal, creating a perfect natural blind. She assembled her rifle, checking and rechecking every component, her fingers moving with practiced mechanical precision despite the cold. Through her scope, she began her surveillance. She counted 17 guards, memorizing their patrol routes, their shift changes, their moments of inattention. At 0400, the compound's commander, Hassan Rahimi, emerged to pray. Raven had a clear, unobstructed shot. Her finger hovered over the trigger, but she held. The location of the hostages was still unknown. Killing Rahimi now might trigger a massacre. At 0430, Williams' voice came over the comms, calm and steady. "Predator drone imagery confirms thermal signatures. 32 bodies consistent with hostage count, located in the northwest building's basement." Minutes later, Raven watched as Rahimi, flanked by 2 guards carrying trays of food, walked to that very building. 32 portions. The hostages were alive. As dawn began to bleed into the eastern sky at 5:30, activity in the compound surged. Guards changed shifts, their movements becoming more predictable. Raven committed every face, every pattern to memory. Then Rahimi emerged again. This time he carried a video camera. 2 guards dragged out an American contractor, forcing him to kneel in the dusty courtyard. Rahimi raised a pistol to the man's head, preparing to deliver a propaganda speech before executing him live on camera. Raven's world stopped. Her breathing ceased. Her core temperature had plummeted to 93 degrees 4, a level that would render most people unconscious. But Raven was not most people. Her hands, encased in thin tactical gloves, were rock steady. The shot was 447 meters. The wind was 6 mph, a full-value crosswind that would push the bullet off course. She adjusted her scope, her mind calculating the holdover with lightning speed. Time dilated. The frantic shouts of the guards, the whine of the distant Predator drone, the rush of the canal water all faded away. There was only the rifle, the scope, and the target. Raven emerged just enough from the water to clear her optic. Droplets of icy water clung to the barrel. She exhaled slowly. the last vestige of air leaving her lungs, and squeezed the trigger. The shot was perfect. The .338 Lapua Magnum round struck Hassan Rahimi in the right temporal lobe, killing him instantly. His body crumpled to the ground before the sound of the shot even reached the ears of his men. Before his corpse hit the dirt, Raven had already cycled the bolt. Click, clack. The second shot took the camera operator center mass. The third shot dropped the guard who had been holding the contractor. Chaos erupted. Guards poured out of buildings running towards their fallen commander, exposing themselves in their panic. Raven became a machine of death, her movements fluid and economical. Bolt, breathe, squeeze, cycle. 5 more shots in 20 seconds. 5 more guards fell, each one picked off with surgical precision. Delta and SEALs inbound. 3 minutes out! William's voice crackled in her ear. Raven shifted her focus to the basement of the northwest building. 2 guards were visible through a small high window. One of them was raising his rifle, clearly intending to execute the hostages in retaliation. Raven threaded a shot through the tiny window opening, the size of a dinner plate. The round caught the first guard in the chest. As the second guard spun around in surprise, her follow-up shot caught him mid-turn. 2 guards, finally realizing the threat was coming from the canal, opened fire with their AK-47s, raking the water where Raven had been. The bullets churned the surface but lost their energy and fragmented within a meter of hitting the water. Raven simply let the current carry her 20 meters downstream, then surfaced behind a new piece of debris. 2 more shots. 2 more dead. On the horizon, the dark silhouettes of MH-60 Black Hawk helicopters appeared. Delta Force operators fast-roped into the compound while SEALs secured the perimeter. The firefight, what little remained of it, lasted 40 seconds. When Williams and Torres pulled Raven from the canal, her core temperature had plunged to a life-threatening 91 degrees. She was shivering violently. Her lips blue, but her eyes were clear, and she was conscious. She had eliminated 15 of the compound's 24 guards before the assault force had even touched down, paving the way for a flawless rescue. All 32 hostages were recovered, unharmed. 6 weeks later, Raven Blackwood stood once more in the JSOC conference room at Fort Liberty. The same 15 men who had doubted her, who had scoffed at her plan, now rose to their feet as one. A slow, respectful applause filled the room, a sound far more meaningful than any medal. General Morrison stepped forward, a small velvet box in his hand. Inside was the Silver Star, newly awarded for her actions in Helmand. Her Distinguished Service Cross recommendation was still making its way up the chain, but everyone in the room knew she had earned it 10 times over. Rare and special operations, the general said, his voice thick with emotion. He handed her a thick, official-looking envelope. "The SEALs want you to have this." Raven opened it. Inside was a check for $50,000, the entire betting pool. Beneath it was a handwritten note. "Ghost 206. You're invited to run our combat swimming course at Naval Special Warfare Command. We need to understand water operations like you do." The SEAL teams. The Delta Force major who had openly doubted her approached, his face a mask of humility. "Staff Sergeant, I owe you an apology. My brother, he was one of those contractors you saved." Raven met his gaze, her expression softening. "No apology needed, Major. I was just doing what I was trained for." Later that day, she sat by a quiet river near Fort Bragg, the sun warm on her face, a world away from the icy canals of Helmand. She was on the phone with her 8-year-old nephew. "Aunt Raven, when are you coming home?" his small voice asked, full of excitement. "Next week, little warrior," she promised, smiling. "I'll teach you to shoot just like my grandfather taught me." "Will you tell me about the river?" he asked, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Raven looked out at the gently flowing water, sparkling in the afternoon light. "The river remembers everything, child," she said softly. "But its secrets are only shared with those who respect it." That night, a simple message was posted on the private encrypted network used by the U.S. Special Operations community. It read, "The River Wraith is real, and she's ours." Staff Sergeant Raven Blackwood returned to her post at the Army Sniper School. Her students, young soldiers eager to learn the art of the long shot, would often joke about their instructor who could disappear into water. They laughed, thinking it was just a cool nickname, a bit of bravado. They had no idea how literally true it was. The 32 contractors she saved didn't forget. They started a foundation in her grandfather's name, Joseph Blackwood, providing rifles, ammunition, and training to Native American youth on reservations across the country, ensuring that the ancient ways of patience, respect, and marksmanship would live on. Raven never gave interviews. She never wrote a memoir. She never sought the spotlight. She simply returned to the quiet rhythm of teaching, of mentoring the next generation of shadows, because rivers, after all, keep their secrets. And the River Wraith? She is still out there, flowing silently through the world's dark waters, waiting for the next impossible mission, the next call for Ghost 206. The story of Staff Sergeant Raven Blackwood is a testament to the extraordinary courage, skill, and resilience that define America's Special Operations Forces. These men and women operate in the shadows, undertaking missions that most of us will never know about, to keep us safe. If this story of the River Wraith moved you, inspired you, or left you in awe, then take action. Subscribe to channels and follow publications that bring you these untold stories of heroism. Share this story with your friends and family. These warriors deserve to have their deeds known. Support organizations that provide for veterans and active duty service members, especially those specializing in special operations. Look into foundations like the Special Operations Warrior Foundation or the Navy SEAL Foundation. Educate yourself and others. Learn about the history and sacrifices of Native American service members who have served in every U.S. conflict with distinction and bravery, often without the recognition they deserve. Honor the legacy. The next time you see a service member, thank them. Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear uniforms, and some, like the River Wraith, move silently through the water, unseen but always protecting.